right, so this section is about extrema and end behavior. So today we're just going to talk about extrema. So extrema are graphs of functions can have high and low points where they reach a maximum or a minimum value. The maximum and minimum values of a function are called extrema. It's a weird word. I assume it's Latin. All right, so this next one, you know, the maximum. Maximum is at the highest point on the graph of a function, and the minimum is at the lowest point on the graph of a function. So those you should be familiar with. Now, we look at some pretty crazy graphs in here. So sometimes you're going to see that there's something called like a relative maximum or relative minimum. Sometimes there's no actual minimum or maximum. So like if you think about a linear function, that's just a straight line. How do you have like a maximum? Is it infinity? So one of these ideas is a relative maximum. A relative maximum is located at a point on the graph of a function where no other nearby points have a greater y coordinate. You might also see this textbook calls them relative. You could see it as like a local max or a local min, but we're going to use the word relative. So then a relative minimum is located at a point on the graph of a function where no other nearby points have a lesser y coordinate. So I think the picture makes it a little more clear what I'm talking about. If you look at example 1, finding extrema from graphs. If you look at this example, this has no actual maximum values because it goes up forever on either side. And we don't usually, even though like we talk about when we talk about domain or range, we'll talk about in the domain it goes up to infinity, and I'll say that's the maximum. We don't include that as like a maximum when we're talking about extrema. This does have a minimum though, and that minimum is right here. So our minimum would be at 0, -5. It's counting by 2's and it's halfway in between. This is not a relative minimum. This is the minimum, or you might even hear it called absolute minimum, because there's nothing lower here. But if you look at part B, technically part B has no absolute maximum or absolute minimum, but it does have relative maximum and relative minimum. So right here, this dip, that is a relative minimum. Relative minimum. Because it's that lowest point like around there. You can have multiple relative minimums. You don't just have to have one. In this case, there is only one, and it is at 0, 4. Then you know I like colors. We do have a relative maximum here. Again, there's no actual maximum because this goes on forever, but our relative maximum is going to be at -2, 8. So again, this is why your homework today, I don't need any work for this because I'm not sure what work you would show me. You might have to round a bit for today's homework. I tried to put in multiple answers, so if you're rounding by like a 10th, or even I think one of them is like 0.25, you'll get it. So you just have to kind of approximate there. I do want to talk about one other example though, like just making some meaning out of these, because again, your multiple choice test might have a question where it wants you to make some more meaning out of what these extrema mean in like context of a situation. So I apologize, this is a little bit wordy, but then I will be done. So find and interpret extrema. We have this social media example where we want to use the table and graph to estimate the extrema of the function that relates the number of hours since midnight, X, to the number of posts being uploaded, Y. And then we're going to describe the meaning of the extrema in the context of the situation. So a couple of things with this. First of all, this is using military time because you can't have an x-axis that goes from 12 to 12 and then starts over again. Like that doesn't make sense for an x-axis. And then the y-axis, this is not saying 11 social media posts. This is saying 1,100,000. So that's, all right, I said that wrong. It'd be 111,000. So that's what that means here. So let's look at our minimums to start. We do have an actual like minimum value here, and that's right here. I'm going to let the table approximate for me because it is like actually on one of the X lines. So our minimum here, our minimum is occurring at X equals 4. So the table says that's at 1.8. If you look at the table here, at 1.8. So to make some meaning out of this, that means that there are the fewest posts at 4 a.m. with 180,000 posts. So our attendance question was very timely by mistake. So all my night owls, even if you're a night owl by 4 a.m., most of you have gone to bed, and that's when the minimum number of posts happens. But we have another relative minimum. You can see there's another dip during the day. So our relative minimum, if you look at like the X value there, that's happening at 14. So 14, 9.1 according to the table. So 14 hours after midnight, excuse me.
Okay, more pictures. I apologize for all these interruptions. But right now, if we could have anyone, last name, A through K, go to 421 or 635. Thank you.
All right, sorry about that. So there is a dip in the number of posts at 14 hours after midnight would be 2 p.m. with 910,000 posts. Okay, so that takes care of our minimums here. And then we have some maximums too. So we have an actual maximum when the most number of posts occurs. It would make sense that we have an actual maximum. So our maximum is occurring when X is 12, so that's at noon. But if I look at my table, it would be 12, 11.5. So we can say at noon, people are the most active with, let's see here, I think I have wrong numbers in here actually. This would be, I think it's actually 1 million now, right? Yeah, 1,150,000 posts. And then we have this relative minimum, or relative maximum, excuse me. Relative maximum. And that's occurring when X is 16. So it'd be 16, 10.2 according to the table. So if we make some meaning out of that, 16 hours after midnight is 4 p.m. So at 4 p.m., there is, we'll call it a spike. It's not the actual maximum, but there is a spike in posts. With, and then I think it'd be 1, 0 posts. Okay, does that make sense, like how we're making meaning out of that? The one you have in your homework is not as complicated. It's actually just a normal parabola. So you're just going to tell me about the maximum and make meaning out of that. But that is it. So you can put away your notes.